Ba weep grana weep ninibong, fellow inorganics. And organics too, I guess. Blech. I am Papatron, the concerned alien parent, and today's video is going to be pretty simple. I will be giving my impressions on the major pieces of media in the Transformers franchise released to date. Comic books, cartoons, movies, books, and video games. Without further ado, let's kick this off with Generation 1. This is not only the single best place to introduce anyone to the franchise, it is the most preferred and referred Transformers cartoon. And no wonder. The toys were amazing. They're still sought out to this day, even recolors and obscure exclusives. They were so popular that many companies made bootleg copies just to cash in on the sheer success. The characters were charming, relatable, and quirky. Even nameless background characters that had no lines and barely a few seconds on the screen were so loved that the fanbase gave them names and personalities. The stories ranged from grand epic battles of good versus evil and wild adventures to thought-provoking dilemmas and crazy situations. The movie made for the series was revolutionary, I dare say. It did so many things that no cartoon, series, or movie ever could have even dared to think. To this day, new entries in the Transformers franchise get based on Generation 1 and draw inspiration from it. The Japanese portion of Generation 1 had Masters, Master Force, and Victory, and Zone that continued the story, saw quite a lot of love and success. In short, Generation 1 will always be number 1. And now, the Beast era. I didn't grow up with the Beast era Transformers. I unfortunately ended up skipping it almost completely due to various circumstances. I did, however, end up watching an episode once in a blue moon and eventually found out how much influence it had on the franchise. Beast Wars essentially saved Transformers at the time. Not only did it take them in a whole new direction as a species, introducing whole new lineups of incredibly diverse characters, but the new doors it opened for storytelling and lore building to this day can be seen throughout almost all of Transformers media. It was the evolution that needed to happen. While there are some people who dislike the very idea, there is a huge portion of the fan base who not only grew up with Beastformers, but defined the franchise for them. Its influence will carry on for many years to come. Robots in Disguise, also known as Car Robots, is hands down one of the best cartoons of Transformers out there. It was a reboot with an interesting setup, phenomenal characters, and equally entertaining story. It was not a very long series, but it offered quite a lot. Skybite and Sideburns need to have their own show. I would pay very good money to see that. Hands down, I would watch over and over again. Now, let's make mention of DW and IDW comic books. I'm not very familiar with the line of DW created. I only read a couple of issues by chance. I did enjoy my short exposure to it, and considering that to this day we see toys being made in the style it presented, it's safe to say that it made its way into the hearts of the fans. As for IDW comic books, you cannot talk about Transformers at this point without IDW comic books. IDW didn't just breathe new life into already established characters, it gave a ton of obscure characters the spotlight and paved the way for new ones too. The sheer amount of universe building, expanding of ideas old and new, pushing not only what kinds of stories, but how far stories go, it raised the bar on Transformers in terms of quality, scale, and depth. Snatching awards and our hearts for many years, IDW comic books will always remain a staple. The Unicron Trilogy. Armada, Energon, and Cybertron made the Unicron Trilogy. It was an interesting time, to say the least, as the franchise wasn't going for just a reboot, but a completely different universe, featuring a completely new story, with fully reimagined characters, and a toy line that likes of which the franchise has never seen before. While it did see success as a good portion of the fanbase liked it enough and influencing to some degree the future Transformers media, there were some pretty glaring problems with it that were hard to ignore. It may not be the most fan favorite or the best series, but it is still very well worth watching. As a quick note, before moving on to the next entry, in Japan, Armada, Energon, and Cybertron were completely separate cartoons that had nothing to do with one another. In fact, Cybertron was actually called Galaxy Quest and featured a lot of content different from the Western counterpart. If you want to know more about what happened with the Unicron trilogy, there are YouTubers who can talk about this in a lot more depth and with a lot more competency than I can. For example, Chris McFeely did a really good job in his Transformers, the Basics on the Unicron trilogy video. Link in the description below. Let's take a short break and we'll be back right after these messages. It's the morning. You just woke up and you have to roll for initiative. That first roll will determine how the rest of your day goes. Do you keep failing the rolls every day? How many times did it feel like you rolled a 1? Well, no more. With D20 coffee, you don't need to worry. It will be like you rolled a 20 every time, every day. The people behind this product proudly stand for maximum quality and guaranteed satisfaction, while bringing you great variety at affordable prices. No matter what bean it is, or how you want it, you can rest assured it will be done to the highest standards and handled with the greatest of care. All you have to do is go to the shop section, select your desired brew, indicate whether you want whole bean or ground, and your quantity. Before you know it, you'll have a new fantastic way to improve your day. Be sure to check out their Facebook and Instagram pages. They love memes, and so do we. Don't forget to join their mailing list to get the latest scoops on upcoming sales, hottest coffee trends, and new arrivals. But wait! There's more! Apply the coupon code Papatron, and not only will you get a discount, you will also help support my channel. And remember, if it is not from D20 Brewers, it might as well be in the sewers. That's www.d20brewers.com. 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 And now, let's get back to the video. You can't really talk about Transformers without talking about the movies, also known as the Bayverse. I remember sitting in the movie theater, watching yet another boring trailer for some unimaginative movie, when all of a sudden, the teaser trailer came on. The teaser that would rock the fan base into a flurry of emotions from excitement to happiness to wariness, anticipation. I am, of course, talking about the Transformers teaser that took place on Mars and a shadowy figure smashing the rover with the title Transforming Before Our Eyes. Who would have thought what an impact the cinematic universe would have? There's a lot of hate that circulates around the movies, and it is easy to understand why. The designs were way overcomplicated and generic. Oftentimes, it looked more like a giant mess of mechanical parts than some robots fighting. The story saw another complete reboot that diminished in sense as more movies came out, so on and so forth. Some aspects did improve, but there were just too many problems cropping up from all sides. Regardless, it did get a dedicated following by bringing in new blood. It did help bring Transformers to the world stage on a whole new level, and just as importantly, Transformers can be successful as a cinematic universe akin to Detective Comics or Marvel. That being said, it did see quite a bit of a turnaround with the latest entry, Bumblebee, giving a lot of fans hope of seeing better movies, especially considering that Cybertronians have the potential to beat out even the colossus of cinematic universes, Marvel. Transformers Animated. There aren't many series that I'm willing to rewatch, but this is hands down one of them. I do not care what episode, I know I'm in for a good time. It is without a doubt one of the better cartoons to ever come out in the franchise. Transformers Animated was made by the same studio as Teen Titans, which is why the animation style was pretty much the same. Almost everything about this series stood out. A completely reimagined universe of Transformers that had it all to give us. A new fun animation style, lovable characters with interesting spins, new stories, and new ideas. Just to give you a quick impression of how it was received, when the news struck that Season 4 was cancelled, the fans immediately started asking Hasbro to bring it back and still do it to this day. At first I had no desire to watch it. The trailer did not get me hooked on it. In fact, my wife, at the time friend, did, and I'm glad she did, because after watching the first 3 episodes, I was binging. I didn't even notice how I came all the way to the end of the series. Not only was it a phenomenal cartoon, it is a very good entry point. Transformers Prime. You will be very hard-pressed to find anyone who did not like Transformers Prime. The aligned continuity might have had a bit of a rough start and turned out to be quite a bit of a mess. Overall, this is one of those cartoons that not only met our expectations, but surpassed them and paved way for better content in the future. The cast was significantly smaller and more so story-driven, but it didn't take away from everything it wanted to accomplish. It was new, it was fresh, it was well written, it gave us time to soak up the atmosphere. The moments that needed to be slow were slow, the portions that demanded high intensity really did keep me on the edge of the seat. I grew very attached to these characters and enjoyed the ride from start to finish. The next of what I want to talk about are the books. First off, the almanacs. Generation 1 saw 2 almanacs, one of the original Generation 1 and the second one for the Japanese Generation 1 continuity. They were essentially treated as proverbial sacred texts by not just the fans, but by the artists themselves. The primary and really the only focus of those 2 books are the designs of the characters, but nonetheless it was genuinely fascinating to see the evolution of the continuity that started it all. If you ever want to enrich your library, I highly recommend to get your hands on those 2 books. And while we're still talking about almanacs, I cannot stress enough how amazing the almanacs were for Transformers Animated. They acted not just as encyclopedias for design, but also character profiles that went over in more detail about the animated universe, and offered so much more extra materials and story bits. Season 4 descriptions, lore building, notes from the staff, and so much more. This simply is a must-have if you're a fan of the animated series. I cannot stress enough just how fun it was going through the whole thing. Transformers Vault, I think, deserves a mention because not only was it written by some of the biggest and most influential people to work on the whole franchise, it also featured never-before-seen content, and perhaps just as importantly, went over the story of how Transformers came to be and how the entire franchise evolved. It really does give a much more expanded and critical perspective, on top of showing us just how much there is to the legacy of Transformers, how much thought, effort, and love went into them. It is very well worth reading from start to finish. There were a lot of other entries on top of everything I just mentioned, and granted, they didn't make it as big, they still had significance to them that makes almost any fan buy them given the opportunity. So now, let's talk about the aligned continuity books. Exodus, Exiles, and Retribution were fantastic books despite some minor editing issues. I was captivated from page 1 of Exodus because instead of setting us on Earth with all the backstory already having taken place, it brought us back not just to Cybertron, but to the time before the idea of the Horde Civil War ever even existed. It was truly a mind-blowing rollercoaster to find out how the relationship between Orion Pax, future Optimus Prime, and Megatron came to be, how it evolved, their origin stories in such level of detail, how their philosophies were both so similar yet so different. How they both wanted the same thing, but ended up on such different paths. At the level, it set the pace and tone didn't die out. It just kept going by going deeper into origins, meeting some of the original primes, then the Quintesson invasion. I enjoyed this through and through. Before we move on from here, there is one more book that I cannot not talk about. The Covenant of Primus. Written from the perspective of the one, the only Alpha Trion, this is a must-have. One of the main reasons why this book is so significant is because finally we had not just a detailed mythos of creation, but an entire history and mythology of Cybertronians that was actually explained and went over. The whole idea of the original primes was not just finalized, but actually given real life and legitimacy. Not only that, Alpha Trion goes over a lot of the other details that have been bugging a lot of people for a very long time. I really wish a lot more people would read this, Covenant of Primus, because there would be a lot of debate that would be just put down so that we can move on to talk about more important things in the franchise. Now let's move on to something else that you cannot not talk about. The Shattered Glass. Shattered Glass was a major turning point for the franchise, not only because it literally doubled already established content, but also all future content. It proved to us just how wild, twisted, and dark Transformers stories can get by creating a universe of opposites where Autobots were evil and Decepticons were the good guys. If you thought that you came across just about the most horrid things in the media, guess what? Any Shattered Glass version of any universe will give you a run for the money. At this point, pretty much every entry in the franchise has had a Shattered Glass spin-off made either officially or by the fans. Not only is it well worth looking at the original material made by Fun Publications, it is fantastic fun looking at what the fanbase has contributed. Or, if you want to try and imagine a dark story for yourself, you're more than welcome to. Robots in Disguise, or otherwise known as Adventure in Japan, was the sequel to Transformers Prime. Aimed at a younger audience, it featured a new story following Bumblebee, showing us just how much the character has evolved and matured not just in this universe but overall in the whole franchise. I will be honest, I had my doubts and I was extremely skeptical about it. In fact, I did not look forward to it at all. But it did win me 100%. This cartoon really is worth the time. The episodes do get a wee bit repetitive. There is a certain formula to them, but there is just so much going on in both the front and the background and the small details. It was really fun. It was a very fun ride. I would board on again and again. Rescue Bots. Oh, Rescue Bots. There is a reason why Rescue Bots is the longest running cartoon in Transformers history. It is mind-blowingly good. Yes, it is aimed at kids, but there's so much for adults to enjoy too. We'll have seen how companies end up dumbing down their own franchises to bring in the young ones, but not this. This cartoon shows that not only can kids follow and enjoy a progressively complicated story with intelligent interactions between characters, but get educated about, honestly, common sense, life lessons, and just as importantly and surprisingly of all, safety, which has Rescue Bots stand above the rest that much more. My kids love watching and talking about Rescue Bots just as much as Generation 1. I love the characters, I love the issues they have, the craziness they come across. I'm down to watch just about any episode at any time. Rescue Bots Academy is the sequel. I haven't had a chance to watch any episodes just yet, but from what I've seen from trailers, random clips, and some promotional material, I think it'll be a very decent entry. The next thing I want to talk about is the Prime Wars trilogy that consists of Combiner Wars, Titan's Return, and Power of the Primes. This was an online miniseries that took place in a universe based on IDW comic book line in the post-war portion of the story. As a miniseries, it doesn't feature a large cast, which unfortunately does end up detracting from the scope and scale of the story. There's just really no way around that. Where it really did a good job, at least in my opinion, was preparing the fanbase for a specific change, and that specific change that we all saw coming for a while now is Optimus Prime and Megatron stepping aside to allow new leaders to take center stage. There are a number of issues varying in significance I can easily talk about for hours, but despite all of that, I really did like it. At the end of the day, I'm glad I watched it. It really did grind my gears when the cast was teeny tiny, when I found out that the cast was really teeny tiny, and yet the whole universe depends on this handful of characters somehow. But there was quite a lot of times I found myself sucked into the scene or the moment, or sometimes the entire episode even. I think Creos deserve a quick mention at the very least. My wife and I absolutely loved collecting them and checked the toy stores and sections regularly for new ones. There were tons of fun, and a lot of the stuff that went with them, the shorts and the comics, I had so much fun. If you have a chance, absolutely check them out. Transformers Cyberverse. Let's first go over what I don't like. Some of the changes and new spins of characters really just don't work for me. And honestly, that is a complaint you'll hear a lot with just about any new verse. It is more so personal than anything wrong with the cartoon itself. It's just that I think that some changes they introduced this time don't really work for some things and certain characters. Now, what I do like about it is pretty much everything else. The setup of the story was interesting and new, how the story progress was entertaining, and the ideas that were introduced and the old ones that were expanded upon really do make this into a solid series. I can't say honestly that I'm looking forward to watching more. And that's pretty much all the major entries in the franchise. There's a new cartoon coming to Netflix, which I just can't wait for. I believe it'll be called War for Cybertron. A little confusing considering there's already a video game called War for Cybertron, but you know what? I'm looking forward to it. I have no doubt it will be amazing and give way to a phenomenal story. The cinematic universe is currently at a bit of a questionable state. Transformers 7 was cancelled last I heard for numerous reasons, but Bumblebee did really well, both in critics' perspective and general public, and proved that Transformers movies can be both critically acclaimed and loved by fans. I think that more so the missing component is heart, but we'll be going over that later. We'll really hope that the future movies will follow Bumblebee's lead and continue to have heart, like I mentioned, as they grow in scale and scope of story. Transformers have enormous, unparalleled potential. The question is, ultimately, at least in my opinion, how to unlock it. Who do we get to work on these movies, and how to keep the ball rolling? How do we combine both success with the fans and economical success for Hasbro and all the other companies involved? This really is hard to do. Not every writer and director can do it properly, if at all. Either way, a lot of us are eagerly waiting to see what will come next. Transformers may be over 35 years old at this point, but the way things are going, it seems like they are finally gaining momentum for bigger, better things in the mainstream media. What are your thoughts on some of the entries I talked about? Which ones did you like, and which ones did you hate? What do you think lies in the future of the franchise? Are you looking forward to it, or would you do something else? Share in the comments below, or you're more than welcome to message me. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed my content, leave a like, subscribe, and hit that bell button. I will see you in the next video. Till all are fun.